Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Noble Father podcast. I am your host, Theophilus. Today is October the 30th, 2023. We got Halloween coming up tomorrow. And yeah, man, just very grateful for everything it took for you to come to this podcast today and to tune in. And wherever you are in life, know that it won't be like that forever. And be present with your kids, because it is important. This past week was a busy one. Saw my cousin get married yesterday, and she's like a little sister to me. Same age as my sisters, and different this time around. Through the pandemic, didn't really get to go to very many marriages, see any weddings, and this was one that we attended, and it's been a while since our last one. And when I say that fatherhood hits you differently, or makes other things hit you differently, definitely seeing my uncle, give the hand of his daughter away to somebody else, his only daughter to somebody else, kicked up some stuff in me, right? At one point, my daughter was sitting on my lap, and she's only 5 right now, and seeing that experience and wondering what that will look like, potentially 13, 15 years from now. I don't know what God's plans are for her, but there's a part of me that's a lot of fear. You're scared. You don't really know what to expect, and it's something to be worried about for sure. But it's a great reminder for me to know that being present now with my daughter and being the man, showing her the example of the man that she should look for one day, is a big priority for me. And so, whenever I got the fears, starting to kick up and the worry starting to kick up, I rest assured in God, obviously, number one. He is my guiding principle, and I try to live in that every single day of my life and try to be as present with my daughter. And so, what is there really to fear? And, I got fathers all over the world who, at any given moment I could call on them to help me deal with this person wherever they're from. So I'm just kidding. I'm not. Please don't hold this. Don't use this as evidence one day. I'm pretty. I'm not. I'm just joking. It's just a lighthearted joke. Today's episode, I want to talk about being in the wrong place, the wrong time, and this is something that we all find ourselves in, because we are all imperfect people, and we all deal with sin. And I know a lot of people don't believe what I believe, but you have morality. You have a sense of morality. You know that rape is a heinous crime. You know that murder is a heinous crime. You know what is right and what is wrong. You feel it. And if you don't feel it, clue into that, definitely. But you have a sense of morality. You know what is right. You know what is wrong. And we all, there are things that we do throughout the day that put us into that's just sin. We lie to a spouse, or you kill somebody in your heart, right? You road rage, whatever. You see this person cut you off and you just wish ill of them. There's different ways to go about sinning, and it births itself. The idea gets implanted, and we give it a foothold, and then it just takes over. This notion of when I think of wrong place, wrong time, I think of fathers. A lot of times where we're going through life, and we, certain circumstances put us into different scenarios that we don't anticipate, circumstances that that aren't ideal, and it's complex. It's hard. You're stuck doing this job now. You had a child, before you were really ready, and then suddenly you had 2 children, and you had 3 children, and suddenly the work that you started out doing, you just can't afford to not do that work. You're stuck. You're kind of in this place, and that's a difficult thing. That's not an easy scenario to walk back out of. Is it impossible? No. But do many people make their way out? Not many. Not very many do. And I like to think of myself as somebody who has a good sample size to be saying what I say. My interactions with fathers, from even just doing it for a year and a half, I'm almost 2 years now. Like I've seen it. I've seen the gamut. Being a moderator in some of the bigger Facebook groups and stuff. The things that I see in there are just, by no means is Facebook or social media an indication of fatherhood in general or globally. North America only makes up a portion of the world, and is not a majority portion, right? And so, but I mean, we have fathers from different places, from African continents, from Australian continent, from New Zealand, from Trinidad, we have from China, we have fathers from the UK. Like, they're all going through the same thing. The people might be very different, the languages might be very different, but the same reoccurring themes are present in their lives and in their circumstances. And something that I came across a story that really, really impacted me, and it made me think of, our intrinsic value, what we, and it really comes down to where we are. Are we in the right place? And I've given the analogy before in a previous podcast. It's probably one of my earlier episodes of, like, if you're born a cheetah, and you are placed in a swamp, right? You're not going to thrive like you would in a savanna. The same could be said about a fish. If I took a fish and I put it in a desert, you're not going to thrive. You're not going to be at your best. You're not going to be able to grow at your best. A cheetah being raised in a swamp isn't going to be able to eat and nourish itself to its best if it didn't have the location of where it would thrive, even then, without good mentorship, right? Cheetahs, lions, tigers, they're all raised by being in the presence of a mentor, of a leader, somebody who teaches them how to hunt, that plays with them and shows them how to sneak up on their friends and then to sneak up on prey, and how to hunt for a living. The environment in which somebody is brought up in accounts for how they succeed. And so a cheetah in a swamp is just not going to thrive, regardless of leadership or not. It has to be in the right place to really, really shine. And this is something that we as fathers really need to understand. Very simply, if the work that you're doing is not causing you to be fulfilled, or is causing you to not be able to show up presently and intentionally with your children, man, something needs to change. Like, you need to do something about it, because you're not coming to life. You're not going to do yourself any good in your self-care. You're not going to do any good in taking care of the ones that you love. That's already two very important trickle-down effects, right? You can't take care of yourself, and so you can't give the best to your children. Well, what's that going to mean for the work that you do, your marriage, your relationships with friends? Like, it's just not gonna equate to a good solution. It's just not gonna be great. And so I want to read this story to you because it was man, like it really solidified in me how important it is to find your place. What is your calling and what is your identity and where are you supposed to be and what is your contribution supposed to be? And when I think about that, is it possible for every single person to make a contribution to this world? I absolutely think so, because when I'm sitting here doing this and leading the community of fathers and doing the meetups, man, like sometimes I feel like I'm not worthy of that calling, but yet I feel like God has given me all these things that I was meant to share and meant to give, and now I'm in this place of fulfillment. Can anybody else do this? Absolutely. Everybody has an opportunity to do this. Whether or not you want to lean into it is another thing entirely. And so whether you want to find yourself, move yourself from this swamp to the savannah, to finally run at your full speed, to grow with leadership and mentorship to get to where you want to go, is another thing entirely. So I'm going to go and read this story to you because it's a very beautiful illustration, and I encourage you, if you're able to, obviously if you're driving, don't do it, but if you're able to close your eyes and listen to this story as I tell it, just imagine yourself in this position, whichever role you want to put yourself in. I would tell you to put yourself in the role of the son in this story. And I'm just going to go to read this story. A dying father called his son to his bedside and presented him with an old pocket watch. The father said, "Your grandfather gave me this watch. It is more than 200 years old. But before I give it to you, I want you to go to the watch shop and tell the owner you want to sell it. Ask him what price he would pay for it." The son went to the watch shop and then returned to his father's bedside. He reported the watchmaker said he would pay $5 for the watch because it is old and scratched. The father then said to the son, "Go to the coffee shop and ask the owner if he would be interested in buying the pocket watch and what he would be willing to pay." The son ran to the coffee shop and quickly returned. He told his father. The coffee shop owner said he didn't have much use for an old pocket watch, but offered $3 for it. Finally, the father said to the son, "Go to the museum and show them the watch." The son left for the museum and returned with a look of astonishment on his face. He whispered, "Father, the curator at the museum offered me $1 million for this pocket watch." The father laid his head back, closed his eyes, and said, "I want you to experience for yourself that the right place and the right people will value your value in the right way. Never put yourself in the wrong place with the wrong people, and then get angry when you don't feel valued. Don't stay in a place or with people that don't value your value. Know your worth, and while being confident in your own value, look for the value and the potential worth of others." Absolutely beautiful story, and one in which that makes me think of, like, yeah, let's just talk about value, right? If you are a person who is, has high empathy and you like to interact with people, and you come to life whenever you get to see somebody grow and develop, and yet the work that you're currently doing is in an office where you're meant to self-start and do everything by yourself and not have any interactions with other people, you could see how your value in that community, in that corporate setting, and how unfulfilled you are, how you're devaluing yourself and your worth by being and keeping yourself in that environment. Now, I talked about circumstances being too difficult, right? Like it's not easy for a lot of people. I totally understand it. Some people have to have that in order to, take care of the family, but that should just be a placeholder. That should just be a place where you hang out for a little bit as you make your exit or find your place, what that eventual place is, right? Because if it's not a fit, right, you're a square peg and you're just trying to force your way into a circular hole, or a receptacle that's not for you, you're going to become you're just gonna break. You're gonna break, and just think about that analogy, right? You're a square peg trying to fit yourself in this hole, right? And you're wood. Let's just say it's wood, right? And the hole, that receptacle that you're trying to fit into, is this sharp metal, and you're trying to fit that piece of wood in there, and it's not going. And you're trying and you're shearing off pieces, you're whittling down pieces, and you're trying to get it in there, and it's just not working, and it's becoming rough, and it's splintering. Like that imagery, it's so visceral, it's so broken. And what would that square peg look like after a while, right? The receptacle is not going to change. It's metal, and it's unchanging, and it's unwavering. But you're just breaking down yourself to the point where your identity is no longer a square peg. You're no longer what you were originally. And now this is the danger here, is that over time, right? Because you could do it once, and you put a little nick in your, little scratch on your square peg. That's not irreparable, right? That's a good experience to learn from, and it's a mistake that you can learn from. But you keep doing it over years and years and years of doing that. You're going to whittle it down, and suddenly you're this oblong, weird-looking shape of a peg that doesn't fit anywhere. And you pass the point of being able to do something, right? So let's just say you tried to fit into the peg and you nicked yourself at the age of 25, right? That's different if you were at the age of 55 or 60 years of age. You keep whittling it down until you're 50 and 60. You're going to miss an opportunity to be able to do anything about that circumstance. You might as well see that to the end. At that point, you've already done so much damage that there's no chance of pursuing what that full ultimate potential could have been had you done it when you were 25. And so this is my warning to you all, is if you find yourself in a place that is not your calling or where you're meant to be, you have a spirit of discernment to know if that's where you're supposed to, or if you know that this is it. Like you know when an environment does not fulfill or it doesn't satisfy that part of you. But you need to lean into that discomfort, because if you keep numbing that discomfort, then things are just not. Just imagine yourself on your deathbed and wondering, what your potential would be, what it could have been, what your children could have been because of a risk that you should have taken when you were 25 or when you were 30 or when you were 35, 40, but not 50, 60, 70 years of age. You've missed the boat. Like, you just can't. There's no way that you can tell me that a person making a change at 25 isn't in a better position than somebody who's making it at 50, 60, or 70. And I want to illustrate something too, is of like, there's an amazing story in the Bible of somebody being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's something that it's very easy for us all to make that mistake. So even a man who was called a man after God's own heart was able to make such a heinous mistake and pay the consequences of. And who knows where he would have ended up if he hadn't done what he did. And it's a sobering reminder for us all, because, as human beings, we are not perfect, and nobody, even a man called after God's own heart, is far from that. So, the person I'm talking about is David, and I reference David a lot. David Goliath, the story, and the way how he waits on God. I think I mentioned that last week. He stayed at the wrong place at the wrong time, stayed somewhere too long, and got himself into trouble. And I'm just going to read that part because it's very quite interesting how this story happened and how it developed. So this is in 2 Samuel 11, and this is the story of David and Bathsheba. And I'll go to talk about that here. So verse 1 says, "In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. And in other versions, it says that David tarried in Jerusalem. And what that means is like, loafed around, hung around Jerusalem beyond his time, beyond the designated time that he should have been there. And so at this point, he's already the king of Israel. He's in Jerusalem, and he rules over the kingdom of Israel. And one of the things, of like, but he tarried, and he hung out beyond his designated time. And this is where he gets into trouble, right? Because he's hanging around, and, it happened. It just says, the second verse just says, it happened. Late one afternoon, when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And so you can see where it's really setting it up. It's like, he's in trouble, right? Like, he's not meant to be there, and he's at the wrong time. This woman is I don't know how on the roof. She's from the roof. So he's probably looking into this person's house, sees this woman bathing. She's very beautiful. He's a young man, and he's the king. What is withheld from him? Pretty much nothing in the kingdom is withheld from him. Obviously, there's the morality piece, right? Like, this is sexual immorality now. This is lust, and this is infidelity, right? Because, he later finds out it's a wife of somebody else, but he summons her, and he ends up sleeping with her and ends up impregnating her. And upon finding out that she's pregnant, arranges for this dude, Uriah, the Hittite, to be put in the front of the military, in the front of the army as they go to invade a place. And when they go to invade, David's plan was, hey, draw everybody back so that this Uriah guy is at the front and he's to be killed, pretty much. Just leave him out there, abandon him. And so he ends up dying. Uriah ends up dying, and so David has taken this woman for his own, and it's a very bad sin. This is just the worst of the worst that you could do. I mean, and you did it in such a way too, right? Like, it's not something that just happens in one day. It's something that happens over months, right? Like this, having done that, did that with the woman, and then for her to find out that she was pregnant, we're talking about month, maybe, right? A few weeks. And then, as this is happening and developing, right, they're figuring out whether or not they're going to go invade another place or whatever. Battle plans are struck. You got supplies and stuff that needs to be arranged for the army, and so this is something that was calculated. This was something that was planned, and he was very devious in the way he went about it. Like, you can imagine what that relationship with God was like during that time for David. Like, he's willfully blinding himself from that relationship and keeping himself from that accountability. And so, Uriah is dead, and God sends a wise man by the name of Nathan to convict David of what he has just done. And he does it with the stories, and a story of a lamb, and somebody who didn't have a lamb had a lamb. The rich man who had a bunch of sheep, took that lamb from that person and whatnot. Essentially, it was speaking about David. And this illustrates the point of, man, you can be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Don't stay at that place for too long. And if you stay too long, you end up putting yourself in a place of no return. Because not only does Uriah die, but the child that Bathsheba carries ends up dying because God punishes David with that. And that is... That's a not an easy thing to lose a child, and so that was a consequence, and he had to live with that. Later on, Bathsheba becomes his wife, and she bears him Solomon, which is crazy because God can still use your mistakes to fulfill what he needs to do. Only an all-powerful God can do that. And so even if you are not in the place that you want to be as a father, if you don't make a decision and you don't do anything about it, it's not like God is not going to provide for you. And I'm not saying that by not doing anything about it, you are sinning. Obviously, if it's like Jonah, right? The story of Jonah where God calls him to go somewhere and he's like, no, I'm going the other way, goes completely opposite and, runs away the other way and then gets swallowed by a whale or a big fish. Like, that's a big lesson. If God is calling you to move somewhere else and you don't, and you willfully ignore him, then you're setting yourself up for destruction. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. And that's the important thing here, is that if you know where you are is not where you're called to be, you need to do something about it. You need to figure out a way out and get out of it. Because let's just use that example, right? You're doing something you don't like. You're not fulfilled. You're coming home stressed. You're carrying all that baggage. And your children see that example in you. You're disgruntled. You get in the house. You just want to sit in your comfy chair. You just want to turn on the TV and watch your favorite show and not talk about anything, not talk about life. Not your children want to come and play with you, but you don't have the energy. You are not fulfilled. That's going to look really dangerous down the road. A few years down the road, you keep doing that, your children are going to see, this is what it means to be a man. This is the man that I should look for. You're probably going to have marriage or relational problems with your spouse because you're not in the same. You're overwhelmed with your own life. You don't know how to explain to her how you're feeling as a man. You already don't share your emotions enough. You don't share your information enough. And so both parties are just left guessing. And this is something that I'm convicting myself on as well. There's a lot of times where in communicating with my wife, I feel like she would have had this information, or she should have guessed that she had that I was going through this. But if I don't go to express to her, she won't get that information. She won't get that context. And so you imagine you're just doing that, and you're trying to, you're fitting yourself into this round hole, and nobody seems to understand you, and all your friends you don't even share deeply with these people, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and spiraling out of control. Your kids are suffering in school, suffering relationally. They may be getting bullied at school. All these things. Who does it land on? What is the extreme ownership bit here? Who takes the responsibility? Right? Dad is not present. Dad is not intentional. Dad is flying off the handle because work is stressful and finances are tight because he's not fulfilled and he's not utilizing the strengths that he's been given. Nobody is celebrating him because he's in a place where he is not meant to do that work, and where his weaknesses, where he's emphasizing on his weaknesses and none on his strengths. As the leader, it's on you, bro. Like, there's really no other way to put it. And yes, you may not know where to start, but if you're listening to this podcast, man, that discovery of where somebody is supposed to be, or what even just the knowledge of yourself, the actualization of yourself. In order to actualize yourself, you must know, you must have knowledge, you must have a grasp of what your strengths are. If you were a cheetah and you didn't know you were a cheetah, there would need to be somebody, you'd have to know. Somebody would have to tell you, hey man, you have claws because it's great for hunting. As soon as you grab onto something, you dig in your claws into them, they're not running away. You'd be able to kill them right away. Your paws are built so that you can run very fast on savanna, on flat ground. Hey, and you have a very great short burst of speed that's very explosive. And if you get close enough and you are within reach of a gazelle in the kill zone, you will be able to catch that thing and you will be able to kill it. That is one of your strengths. Your tail is used for balance. Your sleek body is meant for speed. Your eyes have great vision for seeing movement and also catching prey. Like, all these things tells a cheetah that you are gifted to hunt on the savannah and thrive and be a king of the savannah. Obviously the lion is, but cheetah has its own place, and it thrives in ways that a lion can't. And that's a great thing to transition to, is that a cheetah is different from a lion as it is different from a tiger. The ways in which it does things is different. A cheetah is predominantly a solo hunter, whereas lions are kind of pride, and they go around in groups to hunt together. So they're utilizing different strengths, right? They're utilizing different ways of going about the same thing. A cheetah must do what it does best in order to get its food and provide for its family and do all that stuff. The same is true for you. You have claws, you have paws, you have a sleek body, you have a tail, you have sharp vision. Your strengths are different from everybody else's. And we talk about the domains of wellness, right? Because, you're a spiritual being living a physical life. You have a physical life. You have the emotional, you have the mental, you have your social, environmental, all that stuff. All these things you have strengths in. Spiritually, you have spiritual strength. You have discernment. There are different gifts of the Spirit. Some see things better. Some people are good at expressing things to other people. Some are good at hospitality. Some are good at praying for others. Some are good at, there's so many gifts, interpretation, tongues, whatever, healing even. You have physical attributes. Okay, I'm not built like the 6-foot guys in my gym who are 300 pounds, who are they're just strong, bulky guys that are ethnically, their ethnic makeup makes it so that they are strong in that way. Whereas I'm small, I'm 5'7", 170 pounds. I'm very flexible. I got long, lanky. I can stretch and be flexible. The way I do jujitsu is different from, some of the guys in the gym. Like it's just different. Some of the moves I'd be able to do is going to be different. I'm not going to be able to, mother's milk. Mother's milk is a move where you put the guy's face on your chest and you're pretty much hugging him and he can't breathe and he has to tap. The 300-pound guys, 250-pound guys who are 6'4" do that to me all the time. They're able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that to a 300-pound dude. So there's a difference in strengths in our physical attributes, right? I may have longer endurance than one of those guys, and so my game plan is different. Different strengths physically. Mentally, we have different IQ levels, we have EQ levels, there's so many different edges of the sword, even on the mental level. Some people think very clearly, some are very abstract, some are very factual. They deal with numbers better, man. Like even just creativity may be different. There's another strength. So those three things right there they're different strengths. Emotional, how to read people. And this is something that I have very good strength in, is reading people, reading what they're saying, reading between the lines. They're not saying something. The emotional energy they're feeding off of me. I'm able to make calculations. Yeah, it might not be 100%, but I'm cluing into these things in people. You have an edge in your emotional intelligence as well. You have an edge on the emotional realm. There's strengths there to take advantage of. Socially as well, knowing who to be around, sensing people, right? That's very important. Environmental, right? There's all these things all account for this sharp edge. And I like to always use the analogy of a sharp edge, because if we're always using, if we picture strengths and weaknesses as, two blades, the sharp edge is the strength. Very honed, knows what it is. The point is very sharp. It knows how to thrive. It knows how to cut. It knows what it's for. It's very purposeful. The weaknesses is something that's very blunt, right? It's a butter knife. It doesn't have much of a point on it. You wouldn't use it to cut a really rough steak. And it's blunt because it's just not what, it's not what you're meant to use, right? It is weaker. It's not that you can't hone a butter knife. You can't hone your weaknesses, but honing your weaknesses compared to utilizing and continue to sharpen and be even ever more sharp in the strengths that you have, it's going to it's going to do way better than a butter knife on the other end. And that's an important thing to understand. Now you can imagine what this would even mean for your children, right? If you don't know how to harness or discover before you harness, discover the strengths that you have and the weaknesses you have, how are you going to pinpoint that for your children? And how are you going to encourage them and help them to grow to be the best human beings, best contributing human beings to this society as it should be? That is the number one calling for us as parents. We are called to guide our children, mentor our children, and grow them and prepare them for civilization. Not to shelter them, not to keep them from understanding this world. We need to show them how to contend and to use what they're very good at to give the best of themselves to other people. And that is the basis of fatherhood. That is the basis of being a parent to a child. You can imagine what that would mean if you're not present, or if the father is not there. It's no wonder the statistics are so lopsided that it's just not favorable for a child without both parents there. Mother has a strength to play. The father has a role to play. Other members of the family, grandparents, friends, that's important, right? Even just through osmosis and through environment and social, that is important as well. If you hang out with kids that are just bullies all the time, your kids just keep getting bullied and just keep getting put down, and you can imagine what that's going to do to your children. So even socially, the friends that we choose as parents impact our children. That can't be understated. And so, are you willing to put your children in the right place at the right time to thrive? Or are you going to put yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and in turn put your children at the wrong place at the wrong time? That trajectory of the family isn't going to be good, man. You're going to set that chain reaction off, and it's going to impact all the other areas. It's like a house of cards. You take out one of the cards, the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. All of those domains is just going to suffer, right? You're not going to be fulfilled in work. Spiritually, you are ignoring and you're running away from that accountability. You've discerned that this is the wrong place, and yet you stayed there against where you're supposed to be. Physically, you start to suffer. Stress induces your immune system to shut down. You start getting illnesses. You're starting to gain unnecessary weight. You're not taking care of yourself. Because you're not taking care of yourself, you impact your emotional and your mental health as well. You start feeding into the lies. You keep numbing things in your mind, and you don't deal with any of those things. And now because you are in this state socially, you are only going to find friends who aren't going to call that BS out in you. They're going to allow you to stay in that. They're okay with you stagnant. They don't care for your growth because they're not growing either. And you don't want to be told by anybody that you're not in the right place because you're so numb. You don't even want to deal with these issues. Why are you going to have friends who tell you to get out of it? You're not going to have those friends. So that impacts the social, that impacts the environmental. You're not going to put yourself in a place to thrive. You're not going to put yourself in a room where you are the weakest. You're not going to humble yourself. You're just going to stay in that hole, and you're just going to die there. And that's going to impact your children, right? Because you're putting them in all those examples. You're setting the example in all those areas for your children, and you're putting them in the environment to fail. That is the danger. You can see how this is a danger. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I just want to say thank you for joining me on this podcast. If you want to listen to this over on YouTube, you can actually watch the video. That's where I'm going to be releasing the video podcast from now on. Also, if you can subscribe to the Patreon, that very much helps me. It supports me in my work, supports other fathers globally. And, I value all your input. If you're able to, if you're listening to this on the Apple Podcast, please go and rate and send a review there, and also share it with your friends as well. And also rate the show on Spotify or any of the listeners and any of the platforms that you listen to. That greatly helps get this message out. Definitely appreciate everything it took for you to come and listen. If you have any questions about the discovery stuff that you're looking to do, that's what my coaching practice is really about. Is I really love helping people figure out who they are, what now looks like, and where they want to go, because they know now is not where they want to be, but they have an idea, or they want to know what it's like to move forward. And that's where I really come to life. And this is really where I am at my sharpest, understanding who I am and my strengths, in facilitating spaces and holding individual spaces and going deep with one individual on what they are, who they are at the heart, and figuring out where God is calling them, and doing life with them is really where I come to life, and where I'm just super fired up about. And that value, that result that you are getting, is something that you walk away eternally with, because not only do you know yourself better, but you also, the place from which you make the decision from knowing who you are and being firm in your own identity, is something that is irreplaceable, and it's going to change the trajectory of your family, of your own growth, of your own personhood forever. And that's a guarantee. That's an assurance, because when I point out, when we discover your strengths and we understand what your weaknesses are, we are literally working on taking you out of the swamp and putting you in a savanna, wherever that is for you to finally thrive and come to life doing what you're called to do. And when you live like that, the world that my children, my son and my daughter grow up in, is going to be so much better, because your children are going to do the same, and your children after you are going to do the same. And that changes the world. And that is really what I am about here on Noble Father and on my coaching. And so that's all I'm going to say, man. I can go on tangents all day, and I value you all. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. If you are also a father tuning in for the first time, we do meetups on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Great space to just share in the presence of other fathers who understand, who won't let you get away with your BS, who will hold you accountable to what you say you want to do, and want the best for you to get out of the situations, the crap and the what is it called, the quicksand that you find yourself in life. We are there to help and support fathers, and that's what this community is all about. And so please find your way there. You can look up the link tree, which is Noble Father link tree. Actually, so if you're watching the video, you'll see the link at the bottom here, and also the Patreon, Noble Father Patreon. That's where I can get support and to continue this work. And so thank you so much. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. Thank you for all the listeners who have supported me through the years, and continue to grow in this. I love it. Thank you for giving me this platform to listen and spending time with me today. And so hope this finds you well. Take care, and bye for now.